So this is side cutter with a protective plate here for cutting wire so that the wire doesn't get squashed, and an adjustable stop. So this is where things get dicey because of what happens when you cut one side of a piece of wire. One way to avoid all of what I'm going to talk about here is to load the wire into the die so that it only comes down to the very edge of the design, and that will leave you very sharp, super sharp points at the end of your wire here, like this little piece here where the wire comes down like that. It's sharp from that, and it's sharp from the design. So to avoid that, I'm showing this one with the wire loaded past the design just a little bit so that it gives the end of the wire a little bit of meat after it's cut, more like this one, which was set about 30-40 thousandths past the end of the design. So what happens on the first cut is it chops away the design, but it also chops away some of the width of the wire, so that when you load the wire in again the second time, part of this distance has been cut off along the top edge here, so it doesn't fit into the same distance this way. It effectively moves up this way a little bit so that it doesn't come down as far this way the second time around. If that doesn't make sense, let's do it again. It will make sense. So basically what happens is, to avoid that, you can load the metal in only to the edge of the design, but that leaves you with sharp points, which if you want to avoid that, load the metal past the design. But then on the second pass you have to compensate for that. If you want your second pass on the other side of the wire to look the same and have the same amount of meat on the end. And to compensate for that, what you do is make a shim and load it in there. I'll go ahead and do this one since I already did it. Hang on just a second. And you make a shim that is equal to its thickness is equal to the distance that you loaded the wire in past the design the first time. So if you load your wire past here, say 30 thousandths of an inch, you would want to make a shim out of 30 thousandths. Let's start over. If you loaded it past here 30 thousandths of an inch, you would want to make a shim that's 30 thousandths of an inch thick to put right here. That's what this little thing is here. I don't know how well it shows up, but it's a piece of 1/32 inch tool steel, which is 31 thousandths, so whatever. But that should match the distance that you have loaded the wire past the design here, and that will leave you with a wire that's cut evenly on both sides. So that's a pain in the butt. It's a little complicated, but it's what you do if you want real evenness on both sides. This here is, I think it's 0 triangle wire. I had to use this extra piece of, you can't see it, extra thick. Oh yeah, that's one more thing I want to keep reiterating. For a lot of half-round wire and load-on wire, you don't even need this stop. You just load it in there where you want it, and if your wire is perfectly flat, it'll cut it. It won't scoot around. With triangle wire, it behaves a little differently. Sometimes it might behave. The die might hold it down well enough, but you don't necessarily want to rely on that happening. So that's why the adjustable stop system is available, to make sure that the triangle wire in particular, doesn't scoot around from the downward pressure, or just from the die not being able to hold it down tight enough when it cuts, because the pressure wants to push it out this way, out of alignment. So I hope that made sense. Doesn't always make sense to me.